Today is currently day 267 after Datura, and I'm still not free from its hands. I never will be, as Datura has transformed from simply a trip to many permanent delusions and side effects of early onset schizophrenia. It starts a few months earlier in December of 2024 when exploring with some friends at the creek. I found a singular pod on its stem lying detached, far from its mother plant. I instantly recognized it as what it was, Datura, exactly what I had heard the horrific trip reports about. I knew I couldn't just pass it by, so I carefully picked it up, took a quick picture, and gently put it in my bed, making sure the seeds stayed inside the pod. That night when I returned home, I took out the pod and carefully plucked the seeds from their spots and put them into a small plastic container. I then did the same with any seeds left in my bag. For around a month, I'd completely forgotten about it. It sat tucked away underneath paint palettes in fear of being discovered. January 19th, 2025. I knew I was in for something, just not how grand it would be, so I chose a long weekend to take it. Saturday morning, I had taken 5 to 10 seeds with very minimal but noticeable effects, but I wanted more. Around 8 p.m., I had taken some edibles, about 50 to 60 milligrams, a small dose for me. It still wasn't enough. Some part of me deep down craved the chaos I knew more would bring, an insatiable urge. Then, around 9 p.m., I scarfed down exactly 175 seeds. They were bitter, and I had to keep taking breaks to drink water. By 50, the cotton mouth was unbearable. It felt as though every fiber of an actual cotton ball was clawing at the back of my throat, but I pressed on. By the end, my mouth was dry and my water was empty. All I had left to do was wait. By the time I noticed anything, it was 11:02 p.m. It was at this point that I began to have issues seeing clearly and reading, as everything was in motion. I got up from my bed and made my way over to my desk to take off my makeup. When I turned on the lamp, it hurt my eyes way more than usual, and I immediately ducked my head and began to squint blink while slowly looking back up. I finally managed to open my eyes fully, and when I looked into the mirror, I saw to my dismay that my pupils were completely blown. It startled me, and I jumped backward in my chair, scaring myself more as the chair creaked when I jumped. I began to wobble my way back to bed, as at this point my coordination was also very off. I climbed into bed and grabbed my stuffed animals. I checked my phone one final time, the numbers blurry and wiggling. 11:05. Only 3 minutes had passed? What the fuck? I thought to myself as I gently put my phone down, trembling as I did. I remember feeling like I was the exact concept of reality. Everything looked so flat despite warping around my vision's focal point. I closed my eyes and began to see colors and patterns, like millions of tiny dots making up a big, beautiful picture, like sand flowing in the wind. The colors were unlike anything I had ever seen, and eventually I began to fade into a separate space, a space inside my mind, like I had taken a step back into myself. This is when the trip really began. I could suddenly feel my physical body wither away into dust, leaving only my metaphysical body. A thin and clear plasma membrane with dust strings of blue and yellow energy dancing around inside of me. A string with a splattered aura and gentle glow began to wrap itself inside my chest, going through me horizontally, but pulling me in every direction. It was only me and the things I had come to see within myself in that space. I began to feel myself being thrust forward and backward with no particular rhythm, sometimes jolted upwards or downwards with vigor. My body was being thrust through a tunnel of mere consciousness and life. A huge tunnel of colored fractals and 4D shapes moving together like cogs with the ever-tugging string until you eventually reach the dark, empty abyss that looms at the end of the tunnel, its presence making you feel uneasy. By this point, the tunnel is barren of any fractals or expressions. It's just a deep, muted red with a sort of unnatural skin texture. As I looked deeper into the darkness ahead, I began to realize that nothing existed beyond it. I could feel inside my chest that no matter existed there. It was truly empty. I began to feel the string tighten around my heart and came to the sickening realization that beyond the wall was death, the very concept of ceasing to exist entirely. The string, however, did not slow down. I was rapidly being thrown towards the darkness, jolted violently, the string continuing to tighten around my heart. I curled up into the fetal position and looked into my hands. In my palm sat a small ball of pure energy, life, love, and individuality. I could see the edges slowly begin to wither away and the glow gradually get fainter. I could feel my heart begin to slow as I shut my eyes, accepting what was to come despite being petrified. I had to accept in an instant that I was going to die, and I never got to say goodbye. I never got to accomplish all I wanted, and that I would never see anyone I loved again. I held on tightly to my soul and had a final rush of peace. I began to see everything I was and what I had become. I suddenly jerked still. My heart skipped a beat as I opened my eyes and opened my body. I looked to see myself face to face with an empty void of nothing. My arm was practically grazing the pitch black. My soul began to fill again as my heart began to beat and my body began to glow once more. I felt an overwhelming sense of appreciation, gratitude, and love wash over me as I could tell I was being given a second chance to live. I knew then that I had to make my life as meaningful and beautiful as possible, to live my purpose and show love to everyone. I closed my eyes inside my mind and suddenly jerked upwards, my eyes wide open and breathing rapidly. That's when I blacked out. The next thing I remember, I was in the car with my friend, whom I'll call P, and we were driving through the redwoods to a national park, with my family in a separate car behind us. It was now Monday the 20th at around noon. I begin talking to him about Tool, my favorite band, and my favorite songs of theirs. However, I'm having trouble getting anything out, as I feel almost paralyzed in my own body. I keep stuttering and mixing up my words like saying favorite instead of my favorite. It was hard to keep my attention on anything, and my vision was still so blurry up close. I had completely forgotten that I had taken Datura while simply just enjoying the silly hallucinations of colors and warping planes of life with my friend, until he started laughing at a picture he had taken of me earlier in the drive. I looked at the picture, and I was just staring out the window, eyes wide with the straw just far enough away from my lips to look odd, still as a statue. I just kind of stared at the picture, wondering what the hell had just happened. At that point, I remembered I had taken Datura and became very concerned. I started to realize that I knew what I had done to get where I was, but I didn't remember actually doing it. I know I got up early to get ready because I had a full face of makeup on, fully dressed, hair done, and was about 45 minutes from home by the time I became lucid again. I was so confused and just stared out the window for a bit. I started to see little shapes and a figure moving throughout the grass. Not quite a shadow figure though, more like a 2D figure of pitch black triangles and reflecting shapes folding each angle and patterns to move across the horizon line. It was probably around 7 to 8 feet tall and moved quite fast. I started thinking about what animal it could have been and tried to point it out to P, but after turning my head away, I lost it. By the time I'm lucid again, only around 20 minutes have gone by, and we've pulled up to a gas station. P signals for me to get out with him, and I slowly and shakably get out of the car. I'm wobbling and moving extremely slowly, dragging my feet along the ground as we walk in. P is helping me walk and giggling with me the whole time. By now, I am completely delirious, and I black out once again. According to my friend, I was just acting pretty stoned, which he assumed I was since I'm a heavy cannabis user. Another day passes unremembered, and it's now January 21st, and I'm walking into my English class, only to glance up on my way in and see my friends looking at me and smiling. For some reason, I became very, very scared. My heart started racing and my eyes became wider as I just stopped and stared at them for a moment. I remember thinking they had known what I did and were secretly out to get me for it, so I bolted to my seat. However, on the way, I slightly trip over a cord, then proceed to stare at the cord for who knows how long, before asking my other friend if the cord is real in a shaky voice while scooting over my desk on my ass. I sit down, get out my pencil, and go on my phone for a bit. Suddenly, I'm standing next to my friend's desk from earlier, on the very opposite side of the classroom. They begin to laugh as I look at them, extremely puzzled. I asked them what was going on, and they said that I just came up to them and started talking about how much fun I was having. And when they tried to ask me what I was talking about, I just kind of stared at them and then asked what was going on. It was around this point that I again remembered I had taken Datura. I leaned into my friend's ear and told them what was happening, and they said they knew. I was super confused and asked how they knew, and they told me to check my Instagram. I opened up my Instagram to see that I had posted copious amounts of shit on my story, my second private account being the worst. I looked through each story, and the first one was a collage I had seemingly made, with the center picture being of my eyes. I was taken aback as my pupils now took up about 85% of my iris. I quickly opened the camera and examined my face. The first thing I saw was how wide open my eyes were, almost as if they were being pried open by some pair of invisible clamps. Then I noticed my pupils. They were bigger than I'd ever seen them. However, this didn't alarm me in any way, and I gently put my phone back in my pocket and joined in on the conversation again. I watched as the two friends' heads turned into spiraling colors, like those coloring apps where each section is its own color, except the colors are swirling and twisting like smoke in the sunlight. I began to feel as if my mind had taken a seat in the back and I was being pulled away. The edges of my vision started to look like the sides of a Polaroid, and a small gray control panel similar to the one in Inside Out began to appear in front of me. Suddenly, I was inside my head. I was sitting at the back of my mind, watching as my brain stopped for a moment, as the people in my vision stopped moving. I closed my eyes inside my head, and I was gone again. And that is all I remember. Out of 14 days, I only remember 3 distinct segments. I've heard stories of what I would do during that time, like walk on invisible tightropes everywhere, close my eyes and try to find the walls of a room since I had zero spatial awareness, and ramble incoherently for hours on end. However, the horror does not come from the trip itself, but from the effects it had on my mind. Sometime during or immediately after the trip, I experienced my second psychotic break, the first happening 4 years prior in 2021, which I had been treated for previously, but not looked at closely enough. For reference, psychotic symptoms began to present themselves in me at age 8 in 2016 with hallucinations, paranoia, and severe night terrors, which never truly went away. present time, the most recent break lasted around 6 months, starting in January, peaking in late March to early April, and ending around late June. This is where the true devastation begins. I was completely and utterly delusional. My biggest delusion, however, was that I believed around me existed a bubble, and this bubble was the entire universe, like how the world in VR is simply a bubble of flat 2D color around you. I believed I was a multi-dimensional being that was destined to exist in the true universe outside the bubble of the universe I'd come to know. All I had to do was rip through the bubble, and I'd be free into the truth, into the Datura world. This led me not only to go out and search for more Datura in hopes of unlocking eternity, but for the first time in my life, I truly wanted to die. Not because I hated myself or because I didn't want to live, but because death was the only release of my soul into the true universe. The world we live in was a facade. The true world lies beyond our mere 3D fabric of life. Death was the only escape. I didn't want to be trapped in falsities, so I craved death. I wanted to die because I wanted to live. I am lucky I never got to act on that belief. I truly believe there's no better way to explain delusion than writing it out while it happens. However, most are completely incomprehensible, so I'll share the more sensible ones. February 4th, 2025. Everything in the previous universe I knew before all made sense at once, and I could understand every concept, thought, idea, every particle of existence. I could simultaneously understand and experience through myself. I am out of place now. I am in the wrong universe, the wrong plane of existence, like a 3D figure in a 2D world. All I need to do is rip through the fabric of this small, confining reality to make it back to mine, which has no shape and is never ending, no form, yet more faces than numerical values. February 12th, 2025. I am the only truth. I cannot see a future. It's muddy. Nothing to be passed. What does it matter if I move my pen now? Nothing in my destiny aligns with any part of this fabricated reality, simply meant to distract me from my destiny lying deep within the fabric of the universe, rip open to be freed. Will you continue after I leave? I do not know, for if you do, I leave my mark upon the world in which you will remember the absence of the first soul to break through to the true consciousness and universe. February 24th, 2025. I wonder if what must come of my life is up to the pedestal the falseness creates. In the eyes of truth, this world is merely a distraction, nothing more than a blindfold placed upon a soul in order to test the strength needed to live fully. I still don't know whether there are other souls here, either disguised as mine was, or truly I am stuck in an unrendered plane, flat with lies. How many advances have passed while I've been away? I do not want to use I. I am not I. I do not know what I am, but I am not I. How else am I to address how I believe I am? So astonishing to me that a world so intricate and complex can be a mere facade. Think of how grand the truth must be. Send to the beings beyond. How must I get them to hear my cries? Hear me beg and hear me plead. Allow me in. Grant me to eternity. After months of living in an almost completely detached and dissociated state, I was sitting in my psychology class one day where our unit project was due and a new unit would begin. I did not have anything to turn in for the unit, as the project was to create our own inside-out islands with aspects of our personality, but I had no idea who I was, so I was unable to even start. That day was also the beginning of the newest unit, the disorder unit, where we were given a packet of fill-in type notes with the general groups and information about the more common disorders. In this packet was a section on psychotic disorders with the big bold word schizophrenia for all to see. In that moment, for the first time in months, something in my mind clicked and began to realize how far it had actually gotten. After class that day, I cried to her, with my words being jumbled and rambled. One sentence managed to escape coherently: "I don't know who I am." It was that day I realized I needed help, and I got that help shortly afterwards. Many therapists, doctors, diagnoses, and medication changes later, and I am no longer in a state of psychosis. However, I am still schizophrenic, but I am finding ways to embrace it. Honestly, I would stay away completely, as my brain will never recover from the damage it caused.